Depressive disorder, or more commonly known as depression, is a common but rather serious mood disorder. I don't talk about it often in my videos because it's clearly not important or relevant for the type of content I make, but I suffer from depression, and though it's definitely gotten better over time, my bad days are amplified by it, and my really good days are sometimes ruined by it. Although depression is extremely common, it can have serious effects on different people who have it, affecting even the most mundane of activities like showering or sleeping. Hell, just for complete transparency, I'm currently up at 4 a.m. writing this because I can't sleep. I'm lucky enough to have a ton of people in my life that feel the exact same way, and oddly enough, it isn't a misery loves company situation. I think it's great when you can relate to other people about how you're feeling. I have friends who've lost parents, been abused, or just don't know what's going on in their life or what's going to happen. They all handle it differently. We've seen depression portrayed in every form of media at this point, from movies to TV, and even some cartoons and anime have all touched on the topic. It's a tricky thing, trying to act out something that people suffer from daily in a way that will make those affected really empathize with the character and have it resonate with them. And the one form of media I think excels at this especially is in games. What's great about this is video games has helped me, and I'm sure so many others, combat depression, as it is one of the many hobbies that it hasn't ruined for me completely. I've played many games that touch on depression in different ways, whether directly or indirectly, and it's always interesting to see their takes. I've said this before, but video games aren't a passive experience. I'm pretty sure if you were able to play your favorite movie for more than an hour and a half, it'll hit you more. One of my favorite examples of depression in a video game is in the Life is Strange series. In the original game, we encounter a character named Kate, who gets relentlessly bullied by other students because of a terrible rumor. Life is Strange being decision-based, you of course decide how you want to respond, but I'm sure most of us are on her side. Kate isn't a huge focal point in the grand scheme of things, but her arc gets intertwined with Max's in every chapter. But the taunting catches up with her, and she attempts to take her own life, and depending on the choices you made beforehand, the attempts to save her may be harder. I know what it's like to be bullied, and for a lot of us this is probably your first time trying to convince someone that sticking around is worth it, and that she's not really alone. It's some pretty heavy stuff. Even the prequel game, Before the Storm, touches on Chloe's mental health after the death of her dad, and what a narrative juggernaut that was. I've been fortunate enough to not have lost a parent yet, but even then you can't help but empathize with her. Losing someone that is close to you is one of the biggest contributing factors to depression, and there are a ton of other games that touch on that very thing. I'll start off with one of the biggest examples, and arguably the reason for this video, Heavy Rain. If you've never played or seen Heavy Rain, just the title alone sets a pretty bleak undertone for the game's narrative. The game itself follows multiple protagonists with intertwining stories, but the catalyst of the entire story is that of a character named Ethan. Ethan is a successful architect living in a nice suburban area with his wife and 2 sons, Sean and Jason, an idyllic, happy life. But his life took a tragic turn on his son Jason's birthday as he was hit and killed in a car accident. Some time passes and he has divorced his wife as he blames himself for the accident and even moved out of his nice neighborhood, living alone, experiencing constant mental breakdowns and blackouts. I don't even think I see him smile again after that opening section of the game. With this being a decision-based game, you can do your best to steer Ethan's life in the opposite direction, but whether you choose to or not, you can't help but feel for him.
I don't exactly feel lucky, Doctor.
Speaking of decision-based games, this one coming from the same developer, Detroit Become Human is also a great example. Just like in Heavy Rain, you meet another character who lost their child. His name is Hank, and his story is absolutely heartbreaking. He also lost his son in a devastating car accident, which Hank would go on to blame himself for. There's a scene in the game early on where we find Hank blackout drunk on the floor next to a revolver with 1 bullet in it. So Hank, while obviously being addicted to alcohol, has been playing Russian roulette for God knows how long, because he's done. Not to mention his obvious disdain for the android-filled world he lives in. I love that it's completely up to the player how Hank's story ends. If you show him that maybe there is some hope for humanity, he'll choose to stick around. But if you play the game like an android, a soulless creature, a being with no feelings, he'll likely end up taking your life, and maybe even his own.
Get out of here!
Switching gears, I don't know how many of you have ever played Cyberpunk 2077, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time with the game. I think just living in Night City would be enough to make anyone depressed, and there are a handful of them you'll run into on your journey. But what I want to talk about is a side mission that exists of a cop named Barry, who stays in the same apartment building as you, the player, who's apparently been missing work, and it's because he's sad. The life of a cop in Night City is genuinely taking a toll on his mind. In addition to that, he also lost his best friend, and no one is taking him seriously. It's implied that V knows the guy, so I offered to talk to him. I thought I was making the right choices by just comforting him and saying what I felt was right. But in the end, he still ended up taking his own life in my playthrough. Genuinely made me set my controller down and think. I don't know what I did wrong, but in a way, I felt responsible.
Barry, you fucking asshole! I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry.
Mendez, it's too late. He can't hear you.
Your genes were fine, Barry. You were the strongest son of a bitch I knew. I'm so sorry, Barry. I'm sorry.
There are a ton of characters that deal with depressive disorder in their own way. I think about Max Payne and how he lost his entire family and turned to alcoholism. He tries to be a better person, but his past continues to haunt him. Or what about Joel from The Last of Us? There have been a lot of characters I've talked about where their reason is losing their child. But for Joel to lose his daughter in that way literally changed him. He shut himself out for 20 years, begrudgingly waking up every day not caring if he died, because his reason for living was already gone. He doesn't let people in, he never talks about it, he suffers in silence, and the only language he knows is violence. A lot of us have lost someone close to us, been abused or bullied, or have been slaves to an addiction. It's cool that game devs try their hand at a topic like this. Video game characters, especially the main characters, don't always have to be a stoic, battle-hardened badass. They can be vulnerable and pretty passive, which may resonate more with players as it's more relatable. For people who've never really experienced it, depression can just sound like crying in a corner, being constantly followed by a dark cloud. And though that may be true in extreme cases, I've never looked at it as a feeling per se, but as a state. Being in a state of depression is not eating, it's overeating, it's not working, it's also working too much. It's not being able to sleep, and it's not getting out of bed. Video games are the best way I combat my depression, and though they don't bear a responsibility to include the disorder, it's great to let people know that they're not alone. Because you aren't. My name is Spike to the Plug. Thank you so much for watching.